used to this 30-second uh, delay thing. But hello and welcome everyone. Uh, um, so I am glad you all can join. I hope you know I can't see you, so I am cheating a little bit. So in like over here, I where you can't see me, pointing to, I do have the live stream opened up, but it's gonna be hard for me to do my presentation, monitor that, and then also I'm just doing that just in case like I something happens technically, so I can kind of be aware of it. Yeah, so I'm Crystal Preston-Watson, and I am doing a talk about the accessibility tree. An accessibility tree grows in browser. Front range, front end. Super excited to be able to do this. As you might know, this title was a takeoff of A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I just listened to a podcast that was talking about that book, Overdue, if you're looking for podcast suggestions. And it sprung up, and I'm like, you know what would be a good talk? Talking about the accessibility tree. And I can name it An Accessibility Tree Grows in Browser. So that was the inspiration for this talk. Yeah, let's get started. If I can, there we go. So here's the agenda for tonight. You can see my inspired, I'm really going hardcore with this theme. First I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the flow of how, HTML goes from from the fingertips of, I should say that, but just goes from code to the browser and the DOM, sprout, that's the seeds. Sprouting is about the DOM and accessibility tree. Seedling is the accessibility and the accessibility API. Sapling is the accessibility API and assistive technology. That's going to be a really fun time because I'm going to try to do a live demo with voiceover, and and it wasn't going so great earlier. But you know what? I'm going to try to do it anyway still. And then mature, and this is lessons for kind of takeaways for developers, testers, and actually anyone that's involved in the software and web development life cycle. So because I can't really, see questions, and I know that, and some people may not want to engage in the live chat, you can always reach out to me on Twitter. I'm on there a lot. I talk about a lot about accessibility stuff. I also make really, I just bad puns and jokes because I kind of think of myself as a comedian, or at least that's what my grandma used to say, like, you're a very funny kid. But I don't know if she meant that in a comedian way, but yeah, please feel free to reach out to me tonight, tomorrow, in the future, as long as Twitter is around on there. So, and forgive me, I'm also trying to do my notes, and if you see, I actually also have a vision impairment, so my notes are super small, and so I'm trying to do that because usually I have them blown up, and with this setup I'm like, oh, it's kind of tiny, but you know what, we're just gonna go with it. As I said, I'm a comedian, I do improv. Let's, gotta just say yes and go with it. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, as I said, on the seed section, just because I think many of you may already get like the gist of this, but I wanted to do a refresher, or just in case you may not know, because I don't know if there might be some people who are new to development, going to boot camps and things like that, who have come to this talk to kind of understand. So yeah, so browsers. We're all familiar with kind of the most of the major browsers available. There's a lot others, like I think there's something like DuckDuckGo, and so there's tons of browsers. But the major ones that people tend to know right off the bat are Safari, Firefox, Chrome, Edge, Internet Explorer, because Internet Explorer is still used quite a lot, though Edge is the newest and I feel greatest of Microsoft's browsers offerings, and Opera. And I'm going to, like, for the demos tonight, I'm using Chrome, just to give you a heads up. So some of the things that I'm going to show you later on may not be available. The inspector, the dev tools, they all have dev tools, but they're going to look different. And some of the things that are included in the dev tools for Chrome, you may not find, say, with Firefox. But just so you know, like, you have a browser, like say you're a front-end developer, you do some HTML code, and you send that up to a server, and a user wants to interact with how you have created this just bomb website. And so you have a browser, and within that browser there's an engine. And this is where sometimes it gets a little tricky. And just know I am not a browser expert, so but there is an engine. Sometimes you may hear people refer to two engines as a browser engine and a rendering engine. But from my understanding, most of the browser, they are pretty tightly coupled, so they're kind of just the same thing. It's just it does like two big kind of functions. It does more than two functions, but we're simplifying this. This is about the accessibility tree, not about rendering engines. Okay. So let me make sure I did. These are the browsers. You couldn't see that. And I feel like people can't hear me, but so hopefully that's a little hopefully that's a little bit better. I don't know how to fix the sound, but let's go on. If it's I don't know how to fix it, so hopefully that can get fixed. But okay, so rendering engines. That pretty much how they work is that this they interpret so they interpret the inputs that from the user interface, and then along with that they interpret the HTML and XML documents, and most browsers have their own unique rendering engine. As you can see, though, Chrome, Opera, and Edge they share a rendering engine called Blink. Safari has WebKit. Internet Explorer uses Trident, and then Firefox uses the Gecko engine. And so that means that's why when I'm a quality engineer along with being an accessibility engineer, and that's why when you're doing something, you look at a website in one browser, it can look one way, and if you're in another browser, even if you're using the same operating system, it looks another way. And that's because you might be seeing those browsers have two different rendering engines. Usually it shouldn't matter, but we all know that sometimes it does. Like you may, you think you have like, it's like you think it should look the same way no matter what, and no matter what you do, it looks vastly. It might be slightly off in Firefox, and then the way you want in Chrome, and yeah. But no matter what the engine, you'll get a visual representation of your HTML or XML document, but also a rendering of the data structure. And that's where you get the DOM that comes in. That's the document object model. And the DOM is the data structure that's built from source HTML. And that is, it's an interface that represents how your HTML documents are read by the browser. HTML elements are rendered as objects, and then it's also not a one-to-one representation of your source HTML. So each HTML element is rendered as an object. It's important to kind of keep in mind, I am not going to go into JavaScript, which can access and change all and elements of the HTML document that can change the DOM. And I also want to note that I'm briefly along with the DOM, a rendering engine will will render something called the CSS object model, which along with JavaScript will can access and change CSS. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm purely kind of going because this would be such a long talk if I got into all of those different, with JavaScript and also with the CSS object model. And so that's a little brief overview of the DOM, and let's kind of start getting into where the accessibility tree comes about. Okay, first things first, the accessibility tree and the DOM are parallel structures. I kind of like to call sibling, not twins. If you're into if you do makeup, you're into makeup, there's a thing with eyebrows. Like your eyebrows, as they're saying, like your eyebrows are siblings or sisters, not twins. And on the and the picture I have on screen is of the Kardashian sisters, because I just thought they're fitting because I'm talking about eyebrows, and I'm also talking about the accessibility tree and the DOM. So I kind of imagine that the DOM and accessibility tree are, kind of like the Kardashian sisters. I've never watched the reality show, so I don't. That's as much I only know about the Kardashian sisters from Twitter. So that's it. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because I think some people think, well, because the accessibility tree, and as we go, let me slide, is it's accessibility objects are you have pretty much sorry, some technical difficulties with my notes. So the accessibility tree is pretty much are the objects, they're objects that are based on DOM elements, but they're only formed from elements that expose a name, description, role, state, and other things. So pretty much you have the DOM. It is created from the source HTML, and that's that's your divs, your spans, your your headers, your footer, elements, a lot of different things. Now with your accessibility tree, you're only going to get things that are that have additional accessibility objects to expose. And this graphic that is currently on the screen is showing you kind of a graphical rendering of the accessibility tree. I took this from the Chrome developers webpage, and it shows you if you have, say, if you had a a web page, and you would have with the DOM, it would have maybe some other elements, but with the accessibility tree, if you this would come up. So you would have main, the main element, the form, and then you would have these individual objects that would come about. And it'll be a little bit more clear as I go into the demo. So as I was saying, with the accessibility tree, you have the accessibility tree objects. And what makes up a object would be a name, and that's going to be like a label or identifier. So how you can refer to the thing, like a link with the text with read more, and it has read more as a name. And if you have a button, if you have a button, usually a button will use the contents of the button to determine the name. So if you have the button tag and it says submit, and then the ending button tag, then that name would be submit. Then you have the role, which says what kind of thing is this. For example, a button, a nav bar, or a list of items. It matters. This information matters because it gives you the expectation of what this element is doing and how you would interact with this element and what will happen if when you interact with it. And then you have state. Does it have a state? And this is included in the Mozilla web docs that I linked to at the end of this presentation. Does it have a state? An example including checked or unchecked if you have a checkbox, or if you have a accordion object, and is it collapsed? Is it expanded? So that's what state is that object in? And so that brings up a little bit why it's important to use semantic HTML. As I said, the accessibility tree is only formed from elements that have accessible objects. And that HTML, semantic HTML, in HTML5, things like your nav, your header elements, footers, they are semantically meaningful. They have, they provide meaning. But div and spans are semantically meaningless. And it's it may not, when you're not thinking about accessibility, or it may not, it doesn't matter. It's like you're still going to, if you create if you create a section with a div, you put some CSS in it. Visually, it's it looks the way you want to. But when it comes to, say, a assistive technology, it's not. It's not. If there's no accessible elements, it's meaningless. And so let's go into a demo of kind of looking at the accessibility tree and kind of on a live in production site. So let me, okay, so Here is the website, Google Stadia Premier Edition. I just chose this because it was in the news because they got rid of like all the like their kind of in-house developers. So there's going to be third-party developers. I really like games, so this was something. So that I just decided I was like, oh, I might as well use this for my demo. And so if you want to see the accessibility tree on a site that, just any like site that is you come across, this is how you're going to do it. I try to kind of blow up the screen as much, but without being too zoomed in, because what I kind of need and probably what would be good for you is bit different, but I think this is a good middle. So you would go into inspect, and that's going to bring up your elements. So right here is going to show you the DOM, and but that's not going. If you want to see the accessibility tree, what you want to do is actually, and this is and obviously I'm in Chrome right now. So while you're in your dev tools elements, and then you would go to the secondary menu where it has like styles, computed layout, event listeners, DOM breakpoints, properties, and then there's a chevron to show you more options. And in the chevron, sometimes there's a lot more, but for me, it's just the accessibility. So you can go here, click on this, and then it's going to actually show you all the things that are exposed to that have accessibility, accessible objects exposed. These generic comments that you see, these are going to be divs and span elements. They, as I said, they're semantically meaningless, and that's what the accessibility tree is showing you. But now, if I click on, let's click on this button, you can go, and so it shows you the button. If you click on the button with the inspector, you go over here to the accessibility window pane. It'll show you that it's a button. It has this is the sorry. It'll show you the role, and then it's like the role is a button. It'll give you, this is actually, it seems like this is using ARIA, and I will talk a little bit about ARIA a little bit later. It'll, anything that is an accessible object, it will give you that information here. Also, the cool thing I like about Chrome is that if this is too little for you, this accessibility in the dev tools, what I like is that I don't have to do that. If I'm just kind of looking for a quick thing, I can actually go and use this when I'm inspecting the elements. I have the tooltip, and it has accessibility information in the tooltip. So I believe that only came this past summer, like in July. So here on the screen, it has, so for this particular div, it gives you kind of other information, that gives you kind of, typical information, the color, the font, kind of size, the families and stuff like that. And then there's a separate section that's called accessibility, and it gives you the name, and the name is watch the video. The role, it's a button, and it lets you know if it's keyboard focusable, which is really nice when you want to know, when you're doing keyboard testing, when you want to make sure that a keyboard or assistive technology can actually reach this element. And also when you're doing testing and development and testing, because sometimes, as I said, JavaScript can manipulate the DOM, and so if you're expecting something to be in the in DOM order, and it's not, you may not know that until someone lets you know that. But with this, you as you're doing kind of checks and testing, it'll let you know that, hey, it has a green check mark. It's saying, hey, this is, the keyboard can reach this, or if it's grayed out, it tells you that the keyboard can't reach it. So, yeah, let's go back to, if I can go back to my presentation. So, yeah. So, and I know that I talked about, so now that we've seen a little bit about the accessibility tree, I want to start, talking about, and we want to start talking with, so you have the accessibility tree, and you want to start, be like, okay, now I can start interacting with, assistive technology. But before you can do that, you need to talk about accessibility APIs. So accessibility APIs are, along with the tree, are the go-between between application, like the application or your browser, and assistive technology. As a front-end dev, you most likely won't be hands-on with these, but it's good to know about them. And also, if you do some more kind of deeper level kind of back end, you might you might get into some programming with this. And kind of like rendering engines, because they are operated operating system specific. Of course, there's various APIs. So with Microsoft, you have the Microsoft Active Accessibility API, which is MSAA, and then along with AI Accessible 1, 2, and 3. Also, Microsoft, you have the User Interface Automation, UI Automation, and then Linux Accessibility Toolkit, ATK, and Assistive Technology Service Provider Interface, long ATSPI, and then you have the Mac OS Accessibility Protocol, AX API. So yeah, it's good to know about these. Because the thing is that if you're trying to debug or test to see, and you come up on issues, it's good to know where those, where there could be potential bugs and issues at. So, if you're looking and you're trying to find out, like, why is this not working, it could be something here with the APIs. Like, you can never count anything out. So you may not, as I said, you may not work with these hands-on, but it's good to know, good to know about them. So this is a very simple flow that took me hours to to build. It gives you a rough understanding how the information flows from the browser to assistive technology and back. So let's go, it's very simple, but let me kind of give you let me just kind of go through it really quickly. So first, the accessibility tree is created in the browser. And then the tree is sent to the OS Accessibility API. And then the assistive technology, in this case, I have VoiceOver, asks the API for updates, and it gets them. And then the assistive technology kind of announces this to the user. So if you're using like a screen reader, this is when the screen reader will say, checked, checkbox, unchecked, and other information. And the assistive technology will get, the screen reader will get the commands from the user, and then so this, the screen reader will send these back to the API, and then and along with the accessibility tree, like they'll translate it, into like inputs and interactions with the browser, and then it kind of cycles back, as the app, like as things change within the browser. It provides, like, if there's any sort of changes to the DOM, and into the accessibility tree, and you kind of start the cycle all over. So that's a very, very, very rough overview of kind of how it all works. I worked very hard on this, on this flow, and I worked very hard into trying to make it under pretty digestible and understanding kind of how this it all works. Okay, so you might, as I said, I brought up ARIA before, and you might be wondering, like, okay, so are we going to talk about ARIA? So ARIA, if you're not familiar, is the web, and sometimes it's called like ARIA, so the Web Accessibility Initiative, accessible rich internet applications. So WAIARIA. So these are supplemental HTML attributes that can be applied to elements to provide semantic to provide semantic semantics where there is none, and improve accessibility. ARIA allows you to modify the accessibility tree. It is intentional that I'm not going into detail about it, and because I think it's important to know and understand the basics of kind of semantic HTML and and how the accessibility and the DOM all play together before bringing in ARIA. It's just in my opinion, and many others, so I don't want to speak for anyone, that many devs and a lot of testers and a lot of people in tech learn about ARIA before kind of understanding like the basic building blocks of accessibility. And semantic HTML really is the kind of building blocks of web accessibility. It really gives you the things right there, because if you're using semantic HTML, if you're using elements that are not divs and spans, it gives you all that, and you can build out a basic website with semantic HTML, and a screen reader or other assistive tech will understand what it can take someone through that website. And with ARIA, if you don't really have a understanding of the basics, it really leads to kind of some tricky situations. So we're going to go back into a demo, and I am going to hope that you'll at least be able to see voiceover for this. Let me go back here. So just hold a little bit with me for a bit. Let's get out of here. And let me turn on.
VoiceOver on off 36.1.2. Profile. Untitled. Chrome. Stadia Premier Edition. Games without a console or downloads.
Okay. So you probably can't hear it, and that's fine. So I'm just going to read. Oh, it's not showing. I hope that it's going to show. I really do hope that it shows. Oh, it may not, because voiceover is So this is, oh, it's not showing. Uh, so I was hoping that it was going to show the visual output of voiceover, but let me just, you may not be able to see it, but I will read to you what voiceover says. So going back to that button that we had, let me.
Menu, 10 items. Closing menu, Stadia Premier Edition, games without a console or downloads. Google Store, selected, tab. Entering Stadia Premier Edition, games without a console or downloads. Watch the video, button. You are currently on the button. To click this button.
So when I go here, go to the button, it says, and I have to go back.
Link, find out more. Watch the video, button.
So it says watch video button, and then that's what voiceover will announce. You can't see it. Voiceover will, when a voiceover user gets to that button, it'll say watch the video button. So it reads the name, and it also reads the role that this is a button. And then voiceover will do, since it knows that it's a button, and I know that this is using ARIA, so it's actually not a semantic button, but since voiceover knows that this is a button, it'll go and do a further explanation of like, hey, this is a button. If you would like to select this button, I use caps lock space to select this button, and then it'll go do what it needs to do. So I was so sorry. I wish I could have. This was a little bit more exciting and dynamic, but that's kind of the importance of the accessibility tree of the API, and how it lets assistive technology and screen readers know to what to announce to the user so they can navigate through the page, because as with someone who's blind or visually impaired, it's have a visual representation is not going to cut it, and also kind of I want to specify that's why the visual DOM, like you have to make sure that your DOM, your DOM and your visual DOM matches, because that can really be confusing to a assistive technology user if the visual if the visual DOM and that's, or someone like for me, I've had this where the visual DOM, because I still have sight, but I use a screen reader, and sometimes the visual DOM and what the assistive my voiceover, or I use TalkBack on a Android doesn't match. So sometimes there'll be ghost elements that it'll find focus on a empty area of the screen, and it's because the visual, like the DOM and the visual DOM do not sync up. So yeah, let's go back to. Oh, and I'm going to cut this off. So let's close this out. Kind of just lessons to. There we are. There I am. Kind of just lessons about like what this all means, like putting it all together. I guess what I really want to say, I think the most important thing to really come out of this is that it's important to understand accessibility from its very basic building blocks, its very basic beginnings. Really, accessibility is not hard if you think about it from the very beginning. And that very beginning, after design is really how are you going to go about building and developing this, an application or a website, and the more that you rely on the gifts that are there, and that is kind of native HTML, the less work you really have to do to make something accessible. ARIA, as I said, I'm not going into that. If you kind of are dealing with, like, say, legacy code and there's a lot of divs and things like that, yes, that's, I don't want to say never use ARIA, but, you don't, if you kind of, if you can use semantic HTML and make it less work on yourself. And this kind of comes in, in the accessibility tree. It makes it, so when it comes to testing, I definitely feel like it really does help me out, because even before I turn on a screen reader to test something, if I'm testing for accessibility, I can go in, look at, I can, as I showed, open DevTools, go into inspect, look at the accessibility tree, and I already kind of know the layout of where there might be issues. Looking at the accessibility tree, as a developer, looking at that kind of lets you know, it's like, hey, this is something important. If it's not keyboard accessible, like exposed to the keyboard, then it's like, oh, well, I may need to go back and do some things. So that's kind of where, it's the accessibility tree is a gift. It's not the giving tree, because that book is kind of, it's like the Lorax. It's like, the Lorax speaks for the, trees. It's been a while since I read that book. I can't find an analogy. Something is like the Lorax, use semantic HTML. Yeah, let's go. Okay, so I'm going to put this the slides up on my website. It'll be up there starting tomorrow. It's not in there yet, but there will be a section on my site that says slides, and this will be available. And yeah, like I said, this is me. You can always ask me a question on Twitter, Scopic Engineer, SCOPICENGINEER. LinkedIn, just the LinkedIn URL, and the last part is just Crystal Preston-Watson all smushed together. Or you can find my website, which has all these links all together, at crystalprestonwatson.com. And this is it. I didn't go as fast as I thought, but I think since this is supposed to go to 8, if you have questions, I don't know how to do that. But I'm gonna kind of look here and see if there was any questions. uh, I don't know. But yeah, like somehow I'm not gonna leave yet. Somehow, if there's some questions that come to me, I'm going to answer them. But yes, like I said, you can always ask me on Twitter, or you can email me. You can find the email. If you go to the video, let's see the chart. Oh, I don't know. Oh, okay. There's the chat. I'm gonna try to see if okay. Oh, yeah. So I saw that doesn't look like there. Oh, okay. Oh, are there any sites that help with accessibility testing? Yeah, there's quite a bit. Like, you can, so the Pacquiello group, and DQ and Level Access, these are all, they are vendors, third part, like vendors that do, but they do have good information that's available publicly if you're just searching for kind of like starting up, that you could learn about accessibility testing. Oh man, I'm blanking out right now. I think like just Mozilla web docs, just go into their accessibility section. The same with Google developers, go into their accessibility section and kind of getting a fundamental understanding of how accessibility, kind of, on a like a development level, because that really lends into kind of finding out problems and issues that you can run into. The same is with as you start to get into screen readers, learning. There's tutorials for VoiceOver and JAWS. Those are assistive technologies, screen readers, and that's what you're gonna, as kind of, if you're a web developer, those are the assistive technologies that you're gonna probably kind of deal with the most. Though there are many other kind of digital assistive technologies that that are out there. Doing tutorials to learn how to learn how to use screen readers, which also kind of really informs you what to expect from a site as you go through. Kind of like, okay, if I'm doing something, this is on a screen reader, this is what I'm expecting should happen. Just doing those tutorials. Keyboard testing is like the first thing, because it really shows you, like, you're you're matching the visual with the kind of the focus with the focus order. So kind of getting familiar and being able to use your keyboard without using a mouse. There are so many, and I'm so sorry because I'm getting like deluged with tons of stuff, because I've been doing accessibility testing for quite a few years, and so I tend to, even now still, I still just Google accessibility testing, because there's always new information and new kind of interesting kind of takes from people that are always being coming out like every day. Okay, so and so I was using VoiceOver. So you should know that there's usually a preferred pairing of screen readers to browsers. So with VoiceOver, the preferred pairing is Safari. And with NDVA, which is a Windows free Windows screen reader, it's Firefox. And there's various. I like Chrome. I have Mac. I use VoiceOver and Chrome. Now there are issues, as I said. They all have their different rendering, and VoiceOver is not optimized for Chrome. There are issues using Chrome and VoiceOver. I take that, but because I just want to use the browser I want along with the screen reader. Now this is because I do use a screen reader sometimes for a person. As I said, I have visual impairments, so when it's on my personal time, that's what I use. When it comes to testing, like at work and things like that, there are, you want to test with the preferred pairings of browsers. But I do feel like I shouldn't have to limit myself. Like, if I want to use VoiceOver and Chrome, VoiceOver and Firefox Firefox only started to support VoiceOver this past August, so they're in like a beta stage. So if you use VoiceOver in Firefox, Firefox is actually doing beta, and they're encouraging people to submit any issues they have. So I definitely am going to try to support that, because it's like I would like to have freedom of browser. And okay, divs. Sometimes you need extra divs to make the CSS work. So the thing is, it's like, if you have to, sometimes you're going to have to use divs. That's just a fact. If you do that and you need that div to be exposed to you assistive technology, that's where ARIA comes in. So I didn't go over it because this is just a real basic, this was a overview. Aria is going to allow you to expose that div because yes, it's right off the bat you have that div, you it's not going to it's meaningless. But if you use Aria, use those HTML the HTML attributes that Aria provides to use it in that div, that'll expose it to assistive technology. So yeah, it's I there's no way I do not expect people to be like like you should never ever use a div or a span. That is not realistic in the slightest. On my website, I use divs because I used what is this, Bootstrap. Because that was the fastest way to get it kind of mobile friendly. But I did use some Aria when I needed to expose it to, like, for the things that needed to be exposed to a screen reader. So you liked it, okay? Yeah. So if you're going to use a screen reader to test your code, you want to start? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I thought you wanted to write your code. I was like, well, you can use. There is a VS Code screen reader friendly mode. So if you're developing code and you're using a screen reader, you can do that. I found that out because that's going to be quite important for me as time goes on. So, but if you want to get better with a voiceover, there is a tutorial section. If you go into your system, that little gear thingy in your dock, and there's a section that says accessibility. There will be a tab for voiceover, and usually like when you're firing it up, it should allow you to select the tutorial, and then from there I go through the tutorial, and then after that go back as many times as you need, and and after that just start just using it, like spend like an hour or two, like when you want to kind of not just test out your code, but just like to just get familiar with the kind of quirks and stuff like that. It can be overwhelming. Also, I should say, when you're testing, try to test the verbosity, the speed of voiceover, different, like I call them accents with voiceover, because that stuff is important and it does affect like with the verbosity and the like it can. I have mine set at not a fast, like I think it's 70. It's fast for someone who's just new to a screen reader. It is not that fast for someone who's been using a screen reader for years and years. I have colleagues that it is the way their screen readers like rate of speech is so high, and it's just like and I'm like but I got used to it, and and it's fun when you have a couple colleagues who use screen readers and they're both doing something. It's like and it's like I love it. Okay. And I think that is the end of the questions, and we are at time. So again, please email me, hit me up on Twitter, pigeon, though I will be worried if I see a pigeon outside my window, because one, pigeons are very, very dirty, and you know what I live. But I thank you so much, and I'm glad you were here with me on this journey of the growth of an accessibility tree. That is such a lame outro, but yes. Bye.